Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
PD Beats here from Popternative, speaking to JT Neal about pivoting on Fox. Welcome back to the show, man. It's so good to see
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me back. I know that you've been interviewing all of these people that are way more famous and interesting than me, so I'm very honored to be back.
I was telling you before, like, we had a great time last time. I mean, we bonded over both being in quarantine and School of Rock, and we just had a good time, so why not do it again?
Yeah, it feels weird that we're kind of still in quarantine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, who would have thought almost 2 years later we'd still be sitting right here?
It does feel like we did that interview like a long, long time ago, even though it was like 2 years ago. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Well, it's because those 2 years accounted for like 15 years.
Yeah.
Like one quarantine years is like a dog year. You know what I mean? It's like equal to like 7 years.
And I'm trying to figure out, because there was a time, man, where like everything shut down. So all that was happening was I was doing interviews because everyone was at home and everything. And like, I remember.
Dude, that's more productive than me. I was just playing Animal Crossing from like sun up to sundown.
Pretty much.
What else was there to do?
I did like, I don't know if you remember too, like, remember like Instagram Lives, how everyone was doing Instagram Lives for like 3 months straight?
Yeah. I never did. I hated Instagram Lives because I just like, my personal time is like very kind of private to me most of the time. And so I'm never just like, you know what? All of these people are pretty interested in what I have to say right now in the middle of this pandemic. Like, you know, so I never did. But I saw it exploded. I follow a lot of vintage pages. I collect vintage clothes, and it became the thing. People were doing like virtual fleas, and I was seeing these T-shirts sell for like $6,000 on Instagram Lives. I was like, became a whole industry.
No, it's so crazy. We talked about it before. We're talking about pivoting on Fox. Is it cool that you can finally like talk about it? Right?
Oh my God, you have no idea. You have no idea. This was the first thing that I auditioned for when Bless This Mess ended.
Yep.
And it's been a year and a half that I've been like, we shot the pilot in February 2021, and then for it to air January 2022, it's like almost a full year after we shot that pilot that it airs. It's like, and I feel like that happens a lot. You know, I did a movie called Life in a Year like 5 or 6 years ago now, 5 years, something like that. And it took it almost 4 years to come out.
Crazy.
It's just crazy, the timing of some of this stuff.
But I feel like you can expect that kind of going into it. I mean, you know, you talk to your teams, or you talk to people that you work on shows and movies with. I mean, I feel like it's not even a misconception anymore. I feel like people know that you never know when your content and your projects are going to come out. Like, I feel like it goes without saying these days. Yeah,
and you know, I feel like there was so much happening the last 2 years. I feel like if we had aired last year, I think it would have just gotten lost in the shuffle. But now it's like the world is starting to come back a little bit. People have 2 years of just like anxiety and stuff like that. And I feel like our show really does a good job of settling everybody down and just like gives you something that you can go to and escape in for 30 minutes.
100%. And I actually had a specific question about, because it's funny because, well, I have a question about pivoting specifically that I'm really interested to kind of pick your brain a little bit about. Because I watched the pilot. I love it. It's we need shows like this, like you said. But are you also getting used to the kind of sprinkles of a show getting out there to the world? Because there's like, you know, the deadline, like cast announcement stuff, and then there's the release date and the poster. I mean, that's also something to get used to too. It's like sprinkles of pivoting for a while.
It's this weird roller coaster of excitement. You know what I mean? It's like when I get the audition, there's like an excitement there. And then I got the test, and it was like, okay, you're going to be doing a screen test with Jennifer Goodwin. And we were in quarantine, so it was all over Zoom.
Yep.
And so, but there was the excitement of like, oh my God, I'm in the mix again on something.
Yep.
And then a few months went by, and they had actually released me from the mix.
Yep.
So I was no longer an option because they had held me for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought me back in, and they redid my test and everything. And they showed the network, and they ended up going with me. And so then there was that excitement. And then, like you said, it was like, okay, here's the cast announcement. You get your deadline article. That's exciting. You get the we're going to shoot the pilot in February. That's exciting. And then it's like, all right, now we just wait.
Yeah, and then marketing and impress. But like it's one of those things too where, we talk about this stuff. Like we have our favorite kind of movies and everything, and we're all like, you're working in the industry, but you're fans of a lot of stuff too. And we're like, we're dialed in, right? Like we kind of see like announcements. It's so weird to me where like I'm doing a lot of these interviews and press days now for stuff, JT, and it's like I remember when it was like announced. Like no trailer, or they didn't even film it yet. Like I remember when it was announced. Like that wrestling.
There's no cast involved. It's
like that wrestling.
So is writing this new thing.
That wrestling show on Stars called Heels, which was like one of my favorites of the year. I'm a big wrestling fan, so I was like dialed in when that was like announced. Stephen Amell, I was like, yes. And then I'm like doing interviews, and I'm like, this is kind of weird because
it is. It's exciting to be on the other side of it, right? Where it's like, I kind of know what's happening behind the scenes, and our cast is incredible. You have like Maggie Q and Eliza and Jenny. It's like we got an incredible cast. And so there was a lot of excitement around them and them all working together. And so I was getting to kind of see everybody being excited about this show while we're filming it and while everything is, they're running commercials and things like that. So it's because I had done Bless This Mess, and we had a bunch of legendary people on that show too. And so it's just interesting to see it on all sides, because I'm still with you. Like there are things that I look at and I'm like, I can't wait for this to come,
Yeah, it happens a lot. It feels like it's quicker too. And do you feel like it feels sometimes quicker because also we're like invested in it too? Like I feel like, like the Peacemaker, like the John Cena Peacemaker series. Like I feel like that one, like Suicide Squad and everything, but I feel like that one feels a lot like it's there sooner than I thought it was going to be. You know what I mean? Like,
and like it goes back to everything is happening so fast in this time. And it's like last year, it was like I blinked and it was over. And, and so there was so much happening in that time, and so many things that you're like waiting for. And finally it drops and you're like, oh my God, that's right. Like I feel like I heard about this 1,000 years ago, but it was, it's happening quick.
Yeah.
People are churning out content more these days.
It's crazy. You did those Netflix movies, Malibu?
Yeah, the Malibu Rescue movies. Yeah,
they put you as the thumbnail on that. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I saw that on Netflix. I was like, this is the worst marketing campaign I've ever seen. If you want people to watch this, don't put my face up there.
I feel like your messages were like blown up with that, because I sent you a message. I screenshot like that. How many screenshots did you get of that? Like a lot?
I got a bunch of friends that have kids or nieces and nephews. And so they were all watching it with their, nieces and nephews and the kids in their lives. And so that was really cool for me. I'm
talking about like the thumbnail.
Where I'm like, the porta potty scene. Yeah.
Which is no, it was so funny to see that, because I'm like, I know that guy.
I knew when we shot that scene, I was like, this is as good as it's ever gonna get. This is the pinnacle of my career. Yeah. I'm doing fart humor in a porta potty for a beach show on Netflix.
And then, months later, it's the thumbnail to check out the movie, which
I don't know, man.
What a career,
Somebody
man.
at Netflix was like, you know what? I don't think I like JT Neal thumbnail.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, we're talking about it, right? Like,
I know it doesn't work, right?
So pivoting though, this is my question. I don't want to hurt myself by patting myself on the back, but I think this is a pretty good question. So the sitcom's always been complex. The sitcom has always tackled a lot of intense issues with family and a lot of things, right? What's it like working on a sitcom that is dealing with death and dealing with a really tough kind of situation? What's that kind of like for you specifically?
For me, comedy has always come from sadness and dark places, and I was picked on a lot when I was a kid, and so comedy was where I could excel, right? Comedy, if I could make somebody laugh, I wouldn't get picked on, and I feel like that's how comedy's always been. It's come out of tragedy, and it's come out of hard times, and that's what I think this show does really well. Is it takes that trauma and that tragedy of losing a best friend, and nobody's moping about it. You know what I mean? Like, they all have their moments of sadness where, you know, they kind of break down and they're like, God, I really miss my friend. And we've all been there, you know, and we've all, especially in the last 2 years, we've all lost so many people, and they do a really good job of making it so that it's not too saccharine and it's not too sad and people aren't just crying the whole, you know, it's real life. You know, we all have to move forward.
And it's credit to the writers too, right? Because that is a tough thing to do sometimes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's based on Liz Astroff's like real life. You know, she lost one of her best friends. And so she found this, like in her group of friends, like they found this bond that just brought them all together. And they're like, we have to be better. We have to do better things with our lives because it's so short. And she talks about how in real life, the real life Colleen who passed away she was just perfect. She was like a perfect person. And so she was like, when she died, it was like, oh my God, what have we been doing? You know, it brought it all to the surface. And you know, there's so much that can be pulled from that, and Liz and the team just did a wonderful job of bringing that out in the show.
And it's interesting too, and I think the pandemic has really showed this as well. I mean, I don't usually cuss on my show. This is like a first, but like, you know, life's short, life's fragile, and like just snaps like that. Like your give a shit meter needs to go down a lot. I feel like on a lot of things that don't really matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
We get mad about we get mad about so many little things. That just get in the way.
There's so many things that are just way out of your control. And whatever control we thought we had in 2019 and before, I mean, 2020 hit and we were like, I have nothing to do with anything that's happening in this world.
But I think like the self-reflection thing was super huge. And I don't know about you, but for me personally, I'm going to go in with a lot of different kind of perspectives than I did before the pandemic, because I kind of have a pretty big picture of like, what is important and what's not. And to be honest with you, man, like we do harp on things that kind of get in the way. You know what I mean? We do. And it's,
absolutely. Yeah. It was, you know, you could come out of the pandemic and be really kind of like, you know, self-loathing, like, oh, I put on all this weight during the pandemic and I did this and I did that. Or you could just say, hey, I'm doing my best. I'm doing the best I can do. And I'm trying to be better. But there's so much that just like, what I would have been crying about 3 years ago, it just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. No, it's going to happen. But I feel like this show, that's just a perfect tie-in because this show is showing a lot of that. And this show, although it doesn't really take place during like a pandemic, it's kind of like brings up a lot of like what we just talked about too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's our writing team, and Liz is our showrunner. They're amazing.
I thought that it's funny because I did interviews recently with like the cast of other sitcoms, and I was talking about like, what do you think about this landscape now that sitcoms are, you know, being very like intense sometimes at tackling a lot of big important issues, right? And then someone kind of countered and was like, they're diving in a lot more than they are. One could make an argument, but they've always been like that, though. Like Boy Meets World, Fresh Prince. Look at all those shows. Those shows tackle a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that we ever even noticed it before.
No,
you know, it's like I watched Boy Meets World and Fresh Prince growing up.
Sean joined the cult.
Those moments. I know. He worked for the mob. That writer's room was like they were going through something. No, but. You know, it's like all of these things were happening in our existence forever. But I feel like the last couple of years put all of that into context and just showed like, man, there is a lot of messed up stuff going on, and we just got to do our best to kind of pile drive through it. And you know, that's what this show does.
There's no shelf life for a lot of things too. I remember there was a lot of like Family Matters dealt with a lot of race issues, and a lot of those posts, a lot of those clips kind of resurfaced. There isn't a shelf life because of it. So my question to you now too is, what's it like kind of being part, like, you know, you mentioned like Bless This Mess and stuff, like that's a show you worked on like quite some time ago, and unfortunately got canceled, but it has still a pretty dedicated fan base. People go back. What's it like, the fact that a lot of those kind of clips and scenes don't really have a shelf life anymore? Like they're still going to be around.
I think that's a testament to great writing.
Yep.
You know, there are some things that you watch, you're like, oh my God, this is so dated. And like some of the comedy, you're like, oh, that doesn't fly now. you go back and watch some of the sitcoms from like the 80s or the 90s, and there are a lot of jokes in there that you're like, that doesn't really work now.
Yeah.
And I've been really blessed to be on shows that don't have that. They're kind of timeless, and that it's specific to these people's existence right now. It's not a commentary of the outside world. And, I don't like to be overly political publicly in my real life. And so I love being a part of a show that has no real commentary and no point of view, like about politics or where the world is or anything. It's like, this is these people's lives, right?
Yep.
They exist in their own world, in their own space and time.
Yeah.
And
for sure. So,
and that's what makes the show last forever.
Yeah. 100%. No, it's interesting because, talking to Michael Schur about, Parks and Rec and The Office and, in my opinion, like very humble guy, but like he's a genius, that guy. You know what I mean? Like like
legendary.
Yeah. And it's so true. There is kind of like an expiration date on a lot of things in sitcoms. Like it's so true to think about that. But I feel like
humor changes.
Yeah, exactly. Humor changes. That is, and it's something you're seeing a lot now. And it comes up on, like you mentioned, like Instagram and stuff, like the vintage clothes, like TikTok. Like people are like pointing out stuff that was like on sitcoms. Yeah, exactly. I know it's wild if you think about it.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot, and luckily, I don't think that anything that we have done or said in any of my shows that I've been on people are not going to watch them in 30 years and be like, "Wow, did they really just say that?"
Yeah, no, for sure. Before we wrap up, though, pivoting on Fox, when people get a chance to see it, JT, what are you hoping they get out of it, takeaway wise?
I hope that they see themselves in these characters.
Yep.
It's something that we all know very intimately, especially after what we've been through. And I hope that people look at these people and say, if they're going to be okay, I'm going to be okay.
Yep.
And being able to joke about things and make light of these dark situations.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a joke in the pilot where they're like, oh man, if Colleen could see us now, she would just die. And it's like, she literally just died. And they're like, really? And she's like, yeah, I know. I realized I said, so it's like, don't take things so seriously.
Yeah. Life, like you said, life is fragile too. It is.
Exactly.
That's a good.
As long as we can continue to find the joy and continue to have fun, we'll be okay.
JT, pleasure chatting with you again on the show, man.
As always.
Pivoting on Fox, and people can follow you, right, on Instagram and Twitter, JT Neal, right?
Yeah, I'm JT Neal on Instagram, and I think I'm JT Neal IV on Twitter. I don't even remember. Is that terrible of me? I don't even know.
No, I mean, it's tough. Some people, I feel like you might be able to get JT Neal on Twitter, because some people can't, right? Like some people can't get it both. But man, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. You're going to be able to catch JT Neal in Pivoting, which is on Fox. Until next time, this is JT and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.